Hi, friends. Welcome back to my show. My name's Ashley Aireonna. Today I'm joined by Rohan. It's kind of cool to see you. Rohan, we normally do end of week Fridays, but normally we're previewing a game coming up. And today I get to have you the day after a wonderful Thanksgiving Thursday night game. Um, the 49ers kind of put the clamps on Seattle, made it seem like they were not in the same league, not in the same division.
Yeah,
How did you feel about that game? How was your Thanksgiving? How are you doing? Where are you right now? Tell everyone. You back home?
back in the Bay for a little bit. But I mean, you talk about last, this past game, and I mean, it's not like I can say that it wasn't anticipated, but it was an intriguing game. You never know, kind of, when you talk about these divisional games, how they end up going, and so it's good to see kind of how it went when. I don't want to say nothing about it, but with Geno Smith kind of back there, the 49ers have rode with the same game plan for the last, the last few times they've seen Geno Smith, and it's kind of worked to fruition every single time. You don't allow an offensive touchdown in this game. Pretty dominant effort for the 49ers. And the funny part is, I don't think they played near near their elite level of play that we've seen. I think that they had a couple of mistakes for sure, and they still ended up winning by 18 points.
I completely agree. I feel like the Seahawks, it's so interesting because obviously Russell Wilson doesn't look super. I mean, he's looking a little more impressive now that he has Sean Payton, but his transition to the Broncos hasn't been as stellar as anticipated. But I feel like, at least for 49er fans, a lot of the fear with going against the Seahawks kind of came with Russell Wilson. Like, I feel like
Right,
if the Seahawks had Russell Wilson last night, I still would have been much more scared, even with them down, because it felt like the game had to be 2 seconds left on the clock over for them not to have a chance. Like, you always thought that Russell Wilson was going to be able to come back and throw a moon ball at the end. And I feel like too many hearts of 49er fans had been broken by him bringing them back. And now that he's gone, it kind of feels like Seattle isn't the boogeyman anymore. And I heard someone talking about this before the game when they were talking about the players on the 49ers. A lot of those players weren't around for the like hardball years, for a ton of the Russell Wilson years. So they don't even have that same fear of the Seahawks that like fans are more scared of the Seahawks than the players are, cuz so far
right.
under this kind of new team that the 49ers have, they have competed with Seattle in the last 2 years completely. Like I said, not even look like they were in the same league. I wasn't impressed by Seattle's game plan at all. I was talking to a friend. I'm almost never impressed by DK Metcalf for the name that he has in the NFL. And like, I think if people were to size him and like Deebo or him and Aiyuk up, I feel like Metcalf has as good or better of a skill set physically and maybe like traits wise as both of those players. But when
Right.
they're all on the field, Metcalf really never impresses me much. And I found it kind of funny that was Ward was getting under his skin yesterday. The camera kind of panned to him and he was yelling at Geno Smith, I think asking for the ball more. And then on the very next offensive play, Geno Smith throws him the ball and he doesn't catch it. And I was just like, sucks to be you.
Yeah, I
um,
think I think when you talk about DK Metcalf, it's an intriguing topic because Metcalf really the way that he wins a lot are those go routes because he's a unique athlete, right? Such a he's a big receiver. He's 6'4", 230, but he's got elite level speed. And so when you put someone that big and is able to run go routes at the success level that DK does, it usually generates the success. And that's kind of why in my preview, even though I had the 49ers comfortably winning, I believe by like 14 points or so, I thought that the reason that, Seattle could score an offensive touchdown is because one of those go balls usually goes DK's way. The 49ers have a good game plan usually against Geno Smith and against those deep balls, but one usually goes DK's way. That wasn't the case. The
yeah.
49ers were prepared. They clearly said, Charvarius Ward, you got one-on-one coverage. And I mean, I think they game planned well. They knew kind of what Seattle wanted to run, and I don't think there's too much variation in what they ran from last year in that trying to hit those those deep balls. And so the 49ers kind of just executed their plan to perfection. And that's the way you eliminate, a top receiver like DK Metcalf out of the game. You understand the route tendencies that he tends to have, you understand where they tend to target him, and then you try and eliminate those opportunities kind of.
I completely agree, and I also wasn't impressed with their run game. Now I know that they were struggling with injuries, but it just seemed like on all sides of the ball where I made up, okay, this is where the Seahawks could exploit the 49ers. It felt like the 49ers really came out to play, and I actually predicted 13-31 as the score, and then I was on with Jose, and he kind of was like he was like, that's too low for them. And the interesting thing is when I predicted that, I predicted similar to you that DK would get at least one touchdown. But really,
Mhm.
the 49ers defense only gave up 6 points. The other one was kind of off a little bit of a mistake. So I was extremely impressed with the 49ers defense in this game. I felt like as good as the offense did and as good as Brock Purdy played for, I want to say like 90% of his game, I think this battle was really won in coverage and in the defensive line and the sacks that they were able to get. When you look back at this game, do you think that the 49ers look more impressive or that the Seahawks actually look like maybe less of an opponent than some people expected them to be?
I don't know if the 49ers look more impressive. I wouldn't say I came away from this game saying I'm more impressed by how the 49ers have operated. I thought the score would be similar. I think maybe it's more so an indictment on the Seahawks. A lot of people, at least recently, especially with the 49ers slide, thought the Seahawks, had a chance to win the division. And I thought that those talks, even when the 49ers were losing 3 straight games, when Seattle was number one in the NFC West, I thought those talks were kind of far-fetched just because when you look at the matchup between San Francisco and Seattle, San Francisco just has the much better matchup. And I think that that kind of aids them in this effort and trying to get things done. And so I think that that's kind of the way that I look at it. And I don't know even if it's an indictment on Seattle as a whole team, but there's a game plan on how to defeat them. And I do think that the hype around them has simmered down a little bit because they're not as good necessarily as people initially thought. They came into this game even. I think their point differential was negative. It was -2 coming into this game, despite them being 6-4 because they've been blown out and then they've won a couple of close games. And so I think it's more of an indictment that Seattle's a good team, but I don't think that they are in the competition with the 49ers right now to win the number one seed.
I completely agree. So I was kind of saying that I think what stood out to me most on last night's game was the 49ers defense. And I wanted to ask you, Steve Wilks during the slump that you were just talking about took a lot or majority of the brunt of the criticism for the 49ers, even though most people when they started having a conversation about it could kind of share blame with the offensive creativity. There were some fumbles going on by running backs, some errant throws by Brock Purdy. So it was more of a team letdown that I feel like was actually happening, especially with energy and effort. But since Steve Wilks was asked about it in a press conference, and he said, I think the quote was like, "I'm built for this," when asked if he was prepared for the criticism that he was getting or that was getting hurled at him during that during that losing streak. They moved him to the sideline. Who knows how much of that has to do with it because they also added Chase Young. They inserted Ambry Thomas in the starting lineup, which who knew that that was going to be a positive. Um, I think some apologies are in order for Steve Wilks and for this 49ers defense. How impressed have you been with them since the bye week? And how do you feel about them going forward for the rest of the season?
Yeah, I think I'm impressed, but more so impressed. The 49ers, they had mistakes and they've started to clean them up. I think it starts up front with the defensive line. You see the defensive line now, this is their third straight games with 6 sacks. I mean, that's a pretty tough, mark to beat. I think the defensive line, it's been good all year. I don't get me wrong, but I do think it's starting to break out into an elite caliber defensive line that a lot of people anticipated. And I think that, you could attribute that to a couple of reasons. I think they're, with Chase Young in the fold, I think it allows players to potentially play less snaps a little bit, and that allows you to, have a little more rest and things like that. But still, I think elite players are playing at an elite level. Nick Bosa had 9 pressures in this last game. Hargrave himself had 3 pressures, 2 sacks. Armstead, he was in the mix as well. I think all three of those guys really played a role in this one. And so when you talk about strong play up front, you back that up with better linebacker play than in the first few weeks where you see a couple of missed tackles, and that's not characteristic of Fred Warner, not as much of
Yeah,
Drake
he's
London
playing
either.
much better, I feel like, these last
I
three
think that
games.
great point out there. I think that, when you talk about that, I think it's not like things you'll necessarily notice because you expect Fred Warner to play sound football, but he's playing at Fred Warner levels, and I think that's important. And then you talk about the secondary. 2 weeks ago, on a show with Ryan Hensley, I pointed out when he had asked me, who do you think is the most underrated player on the team? I thought it was Charvarius Ward. And this was at a time where Charvarius Ward's going through a little bit of a slump. A lot of people, decking down on Charvarius Ward. I think he's one of the most underrated players on the team, just because when you look at this team and how it's orchestrated, cornerback play is underrated because a lot of people will point to the elite front seven, right? The front seven is one of the best in football. But having elite cornerback one play, like how Charvarius Ward is distributed over the last few games, I think is very important. His value has just been highlighted over the last few weeks. You talk about the emergence of Ambry Thomas as well. There have been some subtle changes that I think have accelerated the 49ers back to the levels that they expect to play at defensively. And it's not against bad teams either. I mean, they played Seattle, who I think they have a good matchup again. They played against Jacksonville, who people might see him as overrated, but that's another playoff team. You're playing against
Mhm.
solid teams, and so I think that this is a good start for your defense, where really they're the ones, they're the ones kind of leading the charge in a way and complementing the offense at a high level.
I completely agree. I like that you pointed out Charvarius Ward. I was one of those people who I feel like I was. It wasn't that I was like saying he was horrible, but I was saying, I feel like the 49ers traded with expectations of a number one corner, and I felt like he was kind of like a 1B, and that his play had slipped off from last season. Now, I did always qualify that with I feel like a lot of people don't talk, and maybe it's one of those things. If you're on the field, you're just going to get criticized, like because if you're playing, you're supposed to be good enough to go. But he was dealing with a foot injury all off season that actually held him out from multiple training camps or from multiple practices during the off season, and
Right.
even I think one of the preseason games it held him out from. Um, and he was taken out in this game for that same injury. So I think it's a pain tolerance injury that he's kind of playing with. Maybe I don't know if it will require surgery. I'm sure we'll hear more this offseason, but it was that same exact injury that he's been dealing with this entire time. So I did always qualify it by like potentially his play slipped because he was dealing with that. But I was someone who was saying that I was maybe unimpressed. And this game particularly, I thought with his matchup on Ward, he was really incredible. Although I did see one of those where Geno Smith, this isn't like a Ward thing, this is an all cornerbacks thing, but Geno Smith just threw like a terribly high and too far pass for DK, and DK doesn't get it. And then you see Ward, who's like behind him, like did not
Right.
interfere with the practice, and he's like, save him. And I'm like, that was
Corners
not
corners
me.
got to do what corners got to do. That's kind of how it is.
I was like, that was not you. But for that's more of just a funny thing that I laughed at. But no, he did. I was incredibly impressed by him. I was actually going to talk about it next, but I was going to talk about game balls. And in my instant reaction, I did talk about Charvarius Ward. I was interested to see how that matchup against him and DK were going to go, because um I felt like he had a really good game against him last year, but then he also had a game where he played, in my opinion, semi poorly. It was right after. I don't know if it was right after, but it was a game or two after that Seahawks or Chiefs game, and I felt like there was a small stretch where his confidence was kind of shook. But no, yesterday I was last night I was extremely impressed with Charvarius Ward, and I was so happy for Ambry. I love like an underdog story, and once again, Ambry's someone who I've been like, make sure he's not on the field, get him off the field. But I think it's really cool when someone kind of goes through a slump and they can come back. And you saw him, it was against Jacksonville, right? Where Steve Wilks was
Right.
on the sideline. He goes up to Steve Wilks after, was that an interception as well? And he goes, oh yeah, because it was the pick six that ended up not counting. And he
Right.
goes up to Steve Wilks and he like takes Steve Wilks, and the camera zoomed in on him and he was like, remember that. Like, this is me kind of I felt like, calling a shot, saying like, keep the faith in me. Like, I'm going to show up. Like, I'm telling you that you're right to trust in me. You're right to put me on the field. And so I think it's really cool when people can have that belief in themselves after having a slump, and then they're able to back it up. And you know what I mean? Now, I think it was in the press conference that Kyle Shanahan, or maybe it was in his post-game speech, called out Ambry specifically and talked about adversity and how impressed he was with Ambry coming back and showing up. So I just love stories like that in general. If you were going to give out some game balls, maybe let's do 2 for offense, 2 for defense. We can start on either side of the ball. Who stood out the most to you?
Yeah, I haven't heard yours, so I have an idea. We can go 1-1-1-1 in a
I
way,
like that.
and
I
so
like
we can
that.
go flip it off. So if I am to start, we can go with the offense, and um, I think I have an idea of who you might give one to, so I'll go with the other. I think Deebo Samuel deserves a game ball here. This is a Deebo type of game. The 49ers look to bring the physicality early, and that's something that you saw. I mean, they did it so much that Tariq Woolen got benched in the first quarter in this game. But Deebo Samuel, he's a guy who has taken more of a secondary role this year because of the amount of playmakers San Francisco has, as well as Brandon Ayuk's continued ascendance from last year. And so when you look at Samuel's role this year, if you look at the way that he's getting the ball, it's a ton of stuff in checkdowns and things like that. Similar to how the 49ers utilize McCaffrey in the receiving game, it's a similar role. A ton of checkdowns, but then you'll also see these certain, not shot plays, but crossers kind of between the second and third levels, the ones that Deebo Samuel thrived on when he had his 1,400-yard season. And you saw a couple of those in this last game. Samuel, 7 catches, 79 yards. That's his second highest output of the year. Back uh, only second to the New York Giants game where, Brandon Aiyuk was out in that one, and Samuel was the number one receiver. So it's a good sign for him, to get involved, for him to see that type of action. I thought he had a really good game, and I thought that he was a key reason why the 49ers set the tone early. What do you think for
I
offense? Who's your guy?
Really quick, I just love that you said Devo. I did talk about Devo yesterday, and Devo, I've talked about this before. He's been my favorite player. I think that 2021 was such a soft spot, but even in like 2019 when he was younger and first coming out, but you saw those sparks in him. I've just really, I love that like physical kind of, no one can bring him down. Getting, especially now the 49ers have so many offensive weapons, but I feel like he really stuck out at certain times of his career on this team as just like such an impressive football player. And then I feel like it wasn't against the Seahawks, but the game previously. I think I pointed out it was on the first drive. The first play of the game went to Deebo. He didn't get any yards. He got automatically stopped. Then it went to Kittle. Then the next one went to him. It was an easy catch, and he just looked like he wasn't running for the ball. Like he didn't catch it. He didn't get any separation. And I remember coming on, and it was like the first time that I kind of agreed with some of the criticism that people have been giving to Deebo, where I was like, he might be physically in better shape, but I'm not seeing the performance, and it's a little bit disappointing. And then of course, the very next game, he goes out and performs just really
Pretty
phenomenally.
darn
It's just
well.
so
Yeah.
nice to yeah, it's so nice. And I like how you said like certain matchups are gonna have certain players shine more. In this Seattle, when it's a game where you want to install your will, Debo's going to be very impactful. And there's something to him too, because in that little slump when he was out, that was a huge thing. So Debo also brings like some sort of emotional or mental component too, not only just his like physicality on the field. But my other game ball, I think the one that you thought that I was going to give out was Christian McCaffrey. I thought
Mhm.
he was incredibly impressive, specifically as a rusher this game. Christian McCaffrey is a great all-around football player, and I think we've really seen him open up this offense in a way of like the dump off passes, making sure that the quarterback always has an outlet when they're flustered. And not that I've been extremely impressed with him as a running back, of course, but this game, I mean, there was a good amount of plays where it was schemed up for him, but there were a good amount of plays where it's him and like 5 to seemingly 20, which I know is an exaggeration, but a lot of
Right.
Seahawks players, and you look at it and you're like, "Oh, the play is done." and then he gets a first down or gets a touchdown. Like the one where he got a touchdown, where he gets the ball and there's like the entire Seahawks team, and he doesn't even go around them. He goes through them and then gets tackled and then falls with like 6 of them on him forward into the end zone. I
Into the
mean,
end zone. Yeah.
that's such a that's the 49ers. Like that's such a like this encapsulates like I know that Kyle Shanahan was beaming. When we talk about the good parts of Deebo Samuel, I think of him as a player who does stuff like that. When I think of the defense and the way that I want this 49ers defense to play, it's that embodiment, like what that play that Christian McCaffrey does to me is so emblematic of this 49ers team under Kyle Shanahan and the style of football that he wants to play. And I felt like Christian McCaffrey did such a good job at that all game. I did see a clip. His girlfriend put it out on Instagram, but one of the 49ers like
Was
aggregate
that the
pages
bruises
posted it.
one? Yeah.
Yeah, he's like black and blue, has gashes. I was like eating my friggin' breakfast when not that I mean I'm like eating happily. He's like living with it, so I'm not not that I'm trying to complain. But yeah, he had like deep cuts and his whole side. I wonder because is he just like completely okay with that oblique kind of injury that he had for a while, or do you think it's still
Seems like
probably just
he's at least in like the bye week kind of helped with that. Seemed
yeah,
like it.
yeah. Because I was gonna say it was on his arm and on his oblique, like his side, that was just completely freaking purple and blue colored. It just you're like skin is not supposed to look like that. And it wasn't like a small little. I'm someone who bruises easily on my legs, so I'm like always
Mm.
falling and like running into shit and like I don't know, randomly trying to backflip, even though I can't backflip, so I should stop doing that. But no, he was extremely black and blue. But I was so impressed by him. Uh, 2 touchdowns, made key runs to keep the 49ers drives alive. Also was good in the pass game to just get first downs. He's always impressive, but there was a couple games where you felt like maybe defenses were keying in on him and slowing him down, and this was not one of those games. If Christian McCaffrey can have games like this all the time, the 49ers are in great hands.
Yeah.
So he'll be my game ball.
I'll
Want to
go to the
do?
defensive side,
Yeah.
and I will give mine. I mean, I talked about Charvarius Ward. I ought I have a ton of praise for him. Like I said, my most underrated player on the team. I'm gonna go with a different name. I'm gonna go with Javon
Mhm.
Hargrave. I thought Javon Hargrave was a big disruptor in the middle. And when you talk about condensing the pocket, making a guy like Geno Smith, who I know he ran for a couple of times, but he's not a quarterback you consider to be overly mobile in this one. And so by collapsing the pocket the way that the 49ers did, I thought that Javon Hargrave did a good job in the middle. I mean, he might not pop off on the stat sheets, although he did have, a sack or a sack and a half. He might not always pop off on the stat sheets and certain things you can critique on, but I thought this game was a really good game for Hargrave. And you when you have a guy like Bosa, when you have different players collapsing around the edge as well, having a guy like that, like Javon Hargrave on the interior, I think is an important part. Last game, Ark Armstead balled out. I mean, 12 pressures, the amount of sacks that he had, he was amazing last game. This game, my game ball, I'm going to Javon Hargrave.
I like that a lot. I think it's I don't think the interior defensive line gets as much notice and praise as they should be. I know I listened to Fred Warner's podcast and last week he praised Javon Hargrave and said that he felt like he was the best player on the defense. And I remember like hearing that and being like, oh, I should pay more attention to that because I like didn't like I thought it was good, but I didn't realize he was, you know, the best player on the defense according to the best player on the defense in my mind. um, so for game balls for the defensive side, I'm gonna go with him. I'm gonna go with Fred Warner. I felt like Fred Warner's these last 2 games has been on another level with his energy and effort. I felt like he was able to mess with Geno Smith's eyes, able to break up passes, kind of get the defense in the correct positions. Looked extremely fast, extremely physical. Was tackling like crazy last game. The Seahawks, I mentioned it earlier, their run game got nothing done at all. I was also just not impressed by their leading starting running back in this game. I know he was a guy out of UCLA, but yeah, I thought that Fred Warner played extremely well.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah. Which is it's a hard thing. I feel like that's a hard thing to say because every game he does really well. So I think It's kind of
But it
funny because
stood
I feel
out.
like,
It stood out, and so
yeah,
that's the
yeah, yeah,
important part to mention.
exactly. Do you have one more for offense?
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to do it, I got to give it to Trent Williams. The reason is I thought the
Oh, that's
49ers
such a good one.
ran a lot to the left side of the ball. Like you talked about Christian McCaffrey, I thought the 49ers, looked to run the ball to the left side. Perhaps it was a matchup thing. I saw Boye Mafe lined up a lot on that right side, one of the young Seahawks edge or outside linebackers slash edge rushers who's kind of breaking out 7 sacks this year. Seemed like they were running opposite to him. And the issue is in a game like this, one of the best Seahawks players on that defense is their defensive tackle, Jaron Reed. He's a pretty solid player, so it makes it tougher to run inside, in between the tackles or, up the middle in a way, in between the guards. And so I thought that running to the left side was going to be important. Trent Williams, I thought, set the tone. You saw a lot of, successful runs to that left side. Christian McCaffrey ends with well above 100 yards. And I mean, well above 5 yards a carry as well. So I thought it was a successful day for him, successful day for the 49ers running game, and I got to give credit to the guys up top.
I love that. It's and since the return of Trent Williams, the 49ers offense has been back to rolling, and I don't think that's a coincidence. I love, love, love that point out. I'm gonna go with Brandon Aiyuk, who had a very quiet game. He was underutilized in my opinion. But when the 49ers kind of had they've done this thing a couple games where, or at least they did last game, where I felt like they came out rolling, just completely dominating the first half. And then in the third quarter, I was like, hey guys, the game, it's no longer halftime. It's not that they were playing bad, but it just felt like they really let their foot off the gas, almost as if they were like, oh, like, we're up by 21 and we're winning, it's totally fine. And I kind of got worried for a second there, like, okay, you know, you are winning, but if they get one more touchdown, then it feels a lot closer and it could be a game. And maybe they're not worried about it because once again, it's Geno Smith, not Russell Wilson. um, but I felt like that final touchdown to Aiyuk really put the game away, and I think that his number should be called more because when it is called, he shows up and makes the pivotal play. And yeah, I was really impressed by him. I think he has a thing going right now. If I was like playing fantasy football or something, I would use him like every other game. So like he has like one really big game and then he won't get that many targets, and then he'll have a really big game and then won't get that many targets. But because his final player's touchdown was so impactful, and because when he is given the ball, he's at least, I think it's like 90% of the time he's catching it and he's
Right.
getting the first down and moving the sticks, keeping the 49ers on the field. I wanted to shout him out. I should have gone with Mitchell, who also did good, but I think
No,
Aiyuk. And
good
you know,
pick. Yeah.
oh yeah. Okay, last one for defense for you.
If we go in with another one, I said Charvarius Ward, said Javon Hargrave. So I'll give some love to the other cornerback, Ambry Thomas. I mean, you mentioned him a little earlier. I thought he had just a nice game. Had a nice break on the ball earlier, a PBU, and then a later interception where he was able to obviously get a nice break on this out route. Didn't think Geno Smith played a great game, but credit to the 49ers defensive backs, Ambry Thomas being one of them for the game they had because, I mean, they made
And
it uncomfortable. Yeah,
it was like a question with him, right? Because he had a good game last game, but he's had so many down games that I feel like the question was kind of like, okay, was that a fluke? Like, did he accidentally do good? And then he's gonna come back to earth for Ambry Thomas that we've come to know. And so it's kind of cool that he was able to continue doing well, and that gives you confidence in him. Now it seems like one game can be a fluke, but 2 games in a row, you're like, all right, you're starting to build some momentum, you're starting to build a pattern here. Now I have confidence in you in next game. Now, obviously, we're gonna get to them in a minute, but Eagles is gonna be a different challenge. But I was also impressed with Ambry Thomas. I like that. I like that pick.
no, definitely. Yeah.
Perfect. And then someone in the comments, they said Brock Purdy for a game ball. And I kind of wanted to transition that into asking you how you felt about Brock Purdy's game if you were going to grade it. I won't expand on it until I hear your answer, but I think I would give him a B, potentially a B minus, depending on how much you want to grade that pick six. But I felt like a B was a pretty good um landing spot for my answer. But I would love to hear your grade and just how you thought about his overall performance, and then maybe I can adjust my grading system depending on what you say and how convincing you are.
Yeah, but no, I'd like to hear what you also have to say. You don't have to adjust based on what I have to say. I'm a little more pessimistic in this one. I'll probably give him a C plus,
Okay,
somewhere
I
in the
like
C to
it.
C plus range. The reason being, I thought Brock had a couple of really good throws, and I thought you talk about the rhythm, right?
Yeah.
49ers had struggled to begin games before. I thought Brock had a really solid first drive, just getting the ball to where it needed to be. A lot of short throws, but throws that were important. You had one to McCaffrey, you had one to Charlie Warner, and then he had one, I believe, to Deebo Samuel. And those were like the main throws kind of on that drive. Starts the game off, I believe, 3 for 3, ends up being 5 for 6 in the first two drives. So it was a pretty solid, start for Brock Purdy, but there were a couple of recurring issues that I noticed. The main one being it seemed he had a little more happy feet than normal. What do I mean by that? I thought there were cleaner pockets that I believe it counted 4 times that he had stepped up into looking to take off as a runner rather than waiting for the progressions to kind of materialize in the passing game. And perhaps they were quick reads that, after they're done, you can't really get something done. But I would have liked him to stay in the pocket for those specific plays. I thought that those kind of led to some imbalance with the offense and also led to some issues offensively in that regard where you could have had potentially some better plays down the field or in some area in the passing game. That was one thing that I noticed. I believe I counted it 4 times. The other one, I mean, there was this stretch right in the third quarter where Brock didn't have
Overthrows.
the best game. You talk about that first throw prior to the interception. I mean, it's just a miss. I believe it was to Deebo or to Juwan Jennings, just a miss. And then the second throw,
Deebo.
obviously, yeah, second throw, it's tipped at the line of scrimmage, which is unfortunate, but you don't want an interception there. I thought that those kind of two stretches were not great overall. For Brock, I mean, I think that he had some really solid throws. The big one was the one to Aiyuk. I thought that one was a beauty, and that single-handedly elevates the grade. But because of some of the issues and also because of the way this game went, where the 49ers, it seemed like were more run heavy in this one, trying to kind of impose their physicality on the ground and also with a variety of short passes, that's where my grade kind of goes for average for Brock Purdy.
Okay, I like that. I think maybe our grading systems are just a little bit different because I feel very like I really agree with everything you said. I think when I think of like a very average to above average, but not like at all elite, like you're not carrying the team at all, but in my opinion, you're also not like completely messing it up.
Mhm.
I feel like in my head that's like a B minus performance. Um, where I think for you that's like a C. And where I struggled was I felt like because he was 21 of 30, had 209 yards, one touchdown, one interception. Now I did feel like he could have gotten more interceptions, but he could have gotten more touchdowns, but in instances where like Christian McCaffrey was doing so well in the run game, he was instead of Brock Purdy throwing it to him, he was leaning forward and getting in. So it did feel like the like when I was when we were talking about game balls, I didn't think of Brock Purdy at all, especially my instant reaction when I was talking about players that stood out to me. Brock Purdy didn't come up, and it wasn't because he didn't, or it wasn't because he did poorly. It was just because the players that had stood out, and comparing Brock Purdy to himself in other games, I feel like he's performed much better where he was the player that stood out. Where this one, I felt like he was much more kind of a cog in the machine, distributing the football, not making too many mistakes. Obviously, the pick six wasn't obviously that's a horrible play. It's like the worst play the worst thing that can happen for any quarterback. But it did feel like for most of the game he had everything flowing in the sticks. You're right. There was the few overthrows during that lull that was kind of like, okay, Brock Purdy, settle down. I have kind of noticed, I feel like after an interception, I don't think so far, I haven't noticed that Brock Purdy has that same like goldfish brain that Jimmy Garoppolo had, where you felt like he could throw an interception and then like legitimately a touchdown on the next play. For so far for this team, now luckily they just have been throwing way less interceptions. But when they do throw an interception, I feel like there's a couple plays, or a drive or two where not just Brock Purdy, but the offense as a whole kind of seems flustered. I don't know if it's like Kyle Shanahan kind of gets scared, so maybe he tries to call the game differently or take the ball out of Purdy's hands. But there was definitely a section where I felt like Brock Purdy was a little bit more shaky. But when I look at his game overall, I would say 75 to 85% of the game, he was just kind of smooth sailing, not doing anything stellar, but not doing anything negative. And then like I kind of even that out by being like, then he did like the worst possible thing, but then he also threw the touchdown at the very end. And when earlier during the low streaks, when I was being much harsher on him, I was saying a lot of that is because I grade the play at the end of the game more harshly. So if you throw an interception, but then at the very end of the game, you're throwing the game winning touchdown or the game sealing, solidifying touchdown, I'm going to put
Right.
more emphasis on that. So that was kind of how I got to the B minus B section.
No, I mean that's a good breakdown, and I mean, again, all of these grades and things like that are always going to be fluctuating different people between different scales and things like that.
Not mine.
Like the
Mine are
reason,
always correct and never. I never,
like the reasoning,
never.
but no, I like the reasoning that you pointed out.
Thank you. Sorry about that. That's just a joke because I am the most easily.
Easily
I don't know if like
persuaded person.
manipulative. Yeah. What's the thing? Everyone says it when you're in like middle school. Gullible. I'm like gullible. Like they're like, oh, you should look up gullible in the dictionary. Like that was I said earlier. I picked the finals. Like I said 13 to 31, and then I was listening to
Uh-huh.
Jose, and he like completely talked me out of it. Or like I was like, yeah, you're right. That was such a bad. I don't even know why I said that. And then they
Such a
did it, and I was
terrible pick that it ended up being right. Yeah.
like, okay. And then I thought this would be like a interesting thing to ask you because I've heard conversations that have made me question this. Fans will debate a lot who's better, Aiyuk or Purdy. Who's better, Aiyuk or Deebo. But when talking about how much more smooth sailing the 49ers offense has been since the return, now it wasn't just of Deebo, it's of Trent and Deebo, which I think is important. But the offense has flown a lot better. And we did kind of talk about in the absence of Deebo, Kyle didn't seem to trust any other playmakers with his role. Like he wasn't giving his role to Ray McCloud, which we've seen happen in previous seasons. So I was just wondering if you could put your head, this is completely hypothetical. We're just playing a what if game, but if you could put your mind in Kyle Shanahan's head, do you think that Kyle Shanahan has more trust for Deebo or for Aiyuk?
I think this is a very, very intriguing question because it's not who do you think is the better player. It's not who do you think fits more for the offense. It's who do you
Yeah.
think Kyle Shanahan trusts more. So I think this
Yeah.
is a good question. To me, the way that I look at it is I think Kyle Shanahan, what does he like the most out of his offense? What does he kind of want to get the most out of his offense? And I think Christian McCaffrey has kind of helped prove he likes these versatile positionless players. I think that's inherent because it allows him to be more creative, and that's where you can scheme up more opportunities potentially for them. As for trust, I think he trusts Brandon Aiyuk more because I think Brandon Aiyuk
Oh.
provides a bigger capability. But as for role, I think Kyle Shanahan likes to scheme up more plays for Deebo Samuel because of what Deebo Samuel provides, but also because that's the role that Kyle Shanahan likes to be creative with. That's the way that I look at it. And I think you were alluding to, when you talk about the offense, Deebo Samuel has returned. The offense is kind of sparked up as of late. You see some multiple 30-point performances now over the past 3 weeks. I think that's intriguing, but I also think one point is important. I think Kyle Shanahan said this after the first win. I don't think that Deebo Samuel changes the outcome of the game like that much. Instead, what Deebo Samuel does, sorry, let me rephrase. Deebo Samuel definitely changes the outcome of the game. But I think what he does for this 49ers team more that Kyle Shanahan said is he changes the mentality and the mindset of this team. They're more energetic, and it's because they got a guy like Deebo Samuel out there. Now, I do think that Brandon Aiyuk is the more valuable player for this team. I do think Brandon Aiyuk is the guy who, if they're going to decide, I've been on this since last year. I do think he's the guy who, if they were going to decide, they should keep. I think he's the better receiver. and things like that. But this question is a very intriguing question because I think it breaks down different things. I think Kyle Shanahan trusts Brandon Ayuk more because I think he trusts him to play his role to a T. His route running capabilities are something you can't ignore. His effort is something you can't ignore. Things like that. But I think he also likes to scheme up more opportunities for Deebo Samuel, given the creativity it allows him to go through.
I love that you noticed that distinction of like trust versus the player maybe he likes the most or has the most fun calling plays for, and also which one is most impactful. Because all three of those could kind of have different answers depending on how you went with them. I agree. I think just like watching maybe the Deebo since being paid and stuff might have swayed Kyle Shanahan's trust in him a little bit. Where Brandon Ayuk, you feel like he's kind of been rising. Now he hasn't gotten paid yet, but and I guess I felt this way about Deebo, but I do feel like Brandon Ayuk isn't the type of guy who would get played and then all of a sudden not have the like drive or will to continue bettering himself as a wide receiver and like holding himself up to his standard. But yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly where that question came from, but it does kind of frustrate me that Brandon Ayuk is still having games where he's only getting 4 targets, and I really would hope that, especially because we've seen in the most impactful games Kyle Shanahan go away from the player, and I do think in some of those games that player was Deebo Samuel. I'm thinking back to the Super Bowl. I think if he, even though he's a rookie, I think if he would have gotten more touches towards the end of that game, that could have changed the outcome. I'm thinking of the first, I think it was Rams game that they lost in the NFC Championship game, where Deebo was completely dominating the entire season and that game, and then inexplicably with 10 minutes left, got 0 touches. So I do think Kyle Shanahan has like a tendency to kind of go away from this player that is like carrying the team. I'm not necessarily saying that this year that's Aiyuk. I think I would actually say it's Christian McCaffrey right now. But I do think as a wide receiver that Brandon Aiyuk has earned his opportunities, and I think that he should be getting a minimum of like 6 targets per game. I'm always a little bit disappointed with how well he's playing when he doesn't get targeted as much. But I agree. I mean I love both players, but I just thought that that was an interesting distinction. And I do agree that I think maybe for like who he is as a play caller, I think he might have more fun calling plays for Deebo Samuel, but I feel like maybe there's some pride in Brandon Ayuk's extension,
Mhm.
ascension. That's the right word. That Kyle Shanahan has. Um, Lastly, I wanted to bring up the next test. Now they do have like, I don't know if you want to call it a mini bye week because that might be excessive, but they have a little bit of extra time, extra rest, which is going to be good. I think some of them were talking about taking time off and healing their bodies or getting away for like very short trips, which I think will be really nice for them to kind of get a little bit more momentum, especially if they don't end up getting that bye later on. But a big way that they will potentially get or not get that bye, something that they would need to have in order to get that number 1 seed, they need to win against the Eagles. Other things would also need to happen. Like I think the Eagles would have to lose against the Bills on Sunday.
They got
But
to lose at least, yeah, one other game. Well, if they want to reclaim the 1 seed, they got to lose this weekend, pretty much. Yeah.
yeah. Um how do you feel about the Eagles game coming up? Do you think that the Seahawks win brace the 49ers for it at all, or do you think it's going to be a whole new level of challenge for the
No,
49ers?
I think it'll be a new challenge. I don't think the Seahawks game kind of relates in a way, just because I think the 49ers match up well against the Seahawks. But when you look at the Eagles, I mean, I'll say what I said against last year when I picked the Eagles to win in that game. It's just a good matchup overall. For Philly and SF, they have a good matchup. You talk about offensive lines. Philly's got, one of the best offensive lines, if not the best in the NFL. That's going to be a good counter for what the 49ers have, creating an intriguing battle in the trenches. And then you talk about the entire offense. I mean, you got AJ Brown there who can win in a number of different ways. He's talented. He can win over the top. But then you also got Devontae Smith, who's in a way AJ Brown is similar to Deebo Samuel, Devontae Smith similar to Brandon Aiyuk, and the capabilities that the guys have. Obviously, a little bit different in skill set with the talent they have. And then you got Jalen Hurts. The one issue when you talk about Jalen Hurts is the 49ers struggle against rushing quarterbacks, and Hurts has the capacity to take on a load in the run game. He can run at a high level. You talk about a strong run game there in Philly too. The 49ers run defense has been pretty strong, but when you space them out, that's when they've been prone to missing tackles in the past. And so, you can talk about a couple of flaws, and that's only on one side of the football. The other side, Philly's got a strong defense. They got good guys up in the interior. Jordan Davis, Fletcher Cox. The 49ers also have struggled at times with their interior offensive linemen against strong defensive tackles. Those guys can serve as disruptors. And then, I mean, Hassan Reddick, everybody knows what happened last time he played against Brock Purdy, which is unfortunate. You got some good players over there in Philly, some good cornerbacks as well. Kevin Byard's there. I just think the matchup is very difficult, especially when you're going there to face, playing the link.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm nervous, and I agree it's going to be a different level, a different test for the 49ers. This game to me is going to be much more what to expect if they do get later rounds in the playoffs. I think this is the level of competition that the 49ers can come to expect, and that they're going to need to prove that they can beat in order to win the Super Bowl if that is their, like, that, not if, that is their ultimate goal. Um I'm interested. I hope that it'll be a really good, close spot win game. I'm not gonna say that I think the 49ers are gonna win. I'm more nervous. Like, I think I'm leaning towards them losing, but I don't want to put that energy out there. Um, I don't think, like, you've kind of heard people say, like, which team wants it more. The 49ers obviously talked a lot of trash, and when it first happened. I think they've calmed down since then. But more what they were kind of saying is, like, we wanted an opportunity to come out and be able to, play you guys with all of our players intact, and with, two very talented teams going against each other with all their best talent. Now, some people can say, hey, they took out your talent. That credit goes to them. So I'm not saying that's wrong or right, but the 49ers definitely talked a big game. So that guys like Deebo Samuel is going to go in on there with, and Christian McCaffrey was visibly frustrated, Radio Row, the Super Bowl week. The 49ers think that they could have gone to the Super Bowl this year. And then, Philadelphia, at least their fans, they want the team to show up and kind of, shut the 49ers up and say, hey, we did deserve to win. We were the better team, and we're still the better team now. And I hope that at the very least it'll be a really fun game. I think fans were kind of robbed of a very exciting matchup, and I'm excited to see what happens. I hope that both coaches bring their best game plan, and I hope that it's not like if the 49ers are dominating, obviously I won't be upset about it. But I'm anticipating a close fought win, or a close fought game on both either side of the ball.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, and I think that kind of the number one thing that I think will ultimately dictate what side it goes is Brock Purdy. I mean, we talk about Brock Purdy and I guess, the recency of him, right? Because he hasn't played too many games, which means you don't play too many games like in playoff environments. Purdy has been one of the most successful regular season quarterbacks in history. I think he's won 13 of his 16 regular season games thus far. He's been very successful as a regular season quarterback so far in his career. The question, though, for Purdy isn't how well can he play against regular competition. We know he can play well. That is not a question. It's, can he carry a team if needed? How well can he play under pressure against elite teams? And what can that ultimately translate to? And Philadelphia is the best test. I mean, if you're talking about NFC teams, or really teams on the 49ers schedule, there's two where you can really be, pointing out as really good challenges: Philadelphia, and then the Baltimore Ravens in Week 16, right before Christmas. Because Philadelphia, like I said earlier, possesses a strong defensive line. This 49ers
Yeah.
offensive line is not to par with this Philly offensive line. They're still not bad, but they're not as good as they were last year, in my opinion. And so, if
Okay.
you're talking about this offensive line, if you're going up against Philly, you're going to face some pressure as Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy won't have, as much time. His margin for error will be less. And so this game is one that I feel like is going to kind of tell us a little bit
He's gonna have
more
to
about
step
Brock
up.
Purdy. Exactly. Against prior to the playoffs, because if you see Brock Purdy have, a really solid performance, being able to carry his team through some adversity, then you're a lot more confident in him going into the playoffs. That's, I think, going to be a determining factor because the offensive line, I think, is going to have some ups and downs against Philly, which means that it's going to be on the quarterback in a way to help carry his team.
I love that. He's definitely going to need to escape pressure, try to minimize the amount of sacks he's playing, really minimize his poor plays. We don't want this to be a, we don't want him to throw one interception, but you don't definitely don't want it to be like a multiple interception game where we've kind of seen him before get flustered, felt like maybe more of the game was on him and he starts to kind of have the tendency to do too much. I think that the 49ers have shown that they can dominate games when they get off to an early lead, their defense is making stops and they're kind of playing from ahead, but it's those gritty wins that we haven't seen them be able to pull, completely pull out yet. Where when it comes to the Eagles, I do think that they've been tested in that way. And that's a way that I've seen some fans kind of try to discredit the Eagles, is they'll kind of be like, oh, well, like they're not they are winning more than anyone else, but they're not dominating. And to me, I actually want, not that, you don't want this if they could obviously go the entire if they could go the whole way and win the Super Bowl being up the whole time, I think that'd be great. But I just think that's unrealistic. So I think there is something as a fan in seeing your team be down or at least be in like a dogfight and be able to pull it out. And I feel like this is going to be the first time that the 49ers have an opportunity to do that. And I hope that they show up. I think that emphasis on protecting the football and making smart decisions and playing smart is going to be really important for Brock Purdy. But he's also gonna have to toe the line because you can't play it too safe against a team that has the ability to make such explosive plays. Like if they want to score quickly, the Eagles could score quickly. So the Purdy's gonna have a big challenge ahead of himself where he's deciding between doing the correct thing with the football and then also knowing when to take his opportunities and when to kind of risk it and take chances, because I think that will be important, and it'll be important. It'll be interesting to see if he picks the right moments or not. I think it'll be at the very least a really intriguing game. I'm really excited to watch it.
No, I agree, and I think that that's a a good take when you talk about it. It's going to be a statement game for Purdy, and so I think that that's going to be something to definitely watch out for. And I think that that's something the 49ers, when you talk about it, are going to look to prepare for Purdy. You're going to try and see kind of how he can progress through the moment. You got a strong team. I think they're going to be at 100%. Aaron Banks hopefully, gets another week of recovery for that turf toe. You'll see
Yeah.
what they do at right guard. I'm going to assume that they're going to start
Mhm.
Feliciano. I'm
I
going to
think so
assume
too.
that that's going to kind of be the plan, um, or at least be in somewhat of a rotation. And so you're going to get a full team. We'll see. It's a good challenge, though, for sure, for the 49ers.
I'm really excited for watching it. The last thing that I wanted to say, just to update everyone, Warren Burks what was rolled out, I think, for the entire year. With
George Odom,
a
you mean?
bicep
Yeah.
George Odom, sorry. Um, with I was thinking about Chris from Twitter. Um, you say Chris, but with the bicep tear. So hopefully, my prayers go up to him and hopefully he'll have a good speedy recovery. But it does seem like the 49ers are going to need to bring in a safety with the loss of Hufanga. And obviously, I mean, I didn't see any amazing plays for him, but I think if your name's not getting called in a negative way, Jerry Brown, I think, did okay. So it'll be interesting to see if they add someone on there. And I think you and I will get to talk one more time before the Philly game. But I really hope you had a great holiday. I hope everyone watching had a great holiday. Obviously, a 49ers win makes it better. A little bit of vengeance seeing the 49ers eat the turkey, throw the turkey into the stands. I saw some fans picking up the turkey from the stands and then eating it, which I feel like is not hygienic, but I don't know. In the moment, I would probably do some weird stuff too. So I had a really good stream with you today, Rohan. Thank you so much for making time for me while you're back home, and I hope you have a really good rest of your holiday.
No, I appreciate you. Thank you, obviously, for hosting. Everybody in the comments for all your insightful comments. Appreciate all of
Yeah.
you. Like you said, happy holidays to everybody, and hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving.
Yeah, everyone have a great time. Please like and subscribe to my channel. I'll probably have something out tomorrow. If not, no, I'll probably have something out tomorrow, but if not on Sunday, depending, because a little bit of a different thing with 49ers not playing on Sunday. But I'm excited to watch the other teams and to talk with everyone. I've said this yesterday because it was Thanksgiving, but I've been really appreciative of doing this, and I'm really thankful for everyone for all the support. Make sure to subscribe to Rohan's YouTube channel and to follow him on Twitter to make sure that you can, I think it's Niners Nation, all of his writing and recaps and everything will be on there. So make sure to like and subscribe to both YouTube channels. Thank you guys so much. Thanks again, Rohan. Signing